NeNe Leaks didn't whisper this time, she unleashed it. After years of silence, years of quietly watching Bravo rebuild its empire without her, and years of fans begging to know what really went down behind those locked studio doors, NeNe has finally broken her silence. And what she's saying now isn't just shocking, it's career-ending for somebody. In a brand new interview, NeNe claimed she wasn't pushed out of the Real Housewives of Atlanta. She was sabotaged, silenced, and intentionally destroyed by the very network she helped build from the ground up. According to her, deals were blocked, calls were ignored, storylines were twisted, and opportunities she was promised were allegedly handed to other people while producers kept telling her to be patient. And when you hear the details she's revealing now, the meeting she says she wasn't invited to, the email she claims mysteriously went missing, and the conversations that allegedly happened about her behind closed doors, you'll realize this wasn't a simple firing. It was a takedown. And NeNe says it started years before fans noticed anything was wrong. NeNe Leaks didn't wake up one morning and suddenly decide Bravo had sabotaged her. This was years in the making, a slow unraveling that fans only saw pieces of, while the real damage was happening quietly behind the scenes. And when she finally sat down in this new interview, the way she spoke, calm, steady, and heartbreakingly matter-of-fact, made one thing clear. She had been carrying this weight alone for a very long time. To understand why her claims hit so hard, you have to go back to the early days of the Real Housewives of Atlanta. Before the brand exploded, before the spin-offs, tried to address things one-on-one, away from cameras and chaos. But according to her, the more she tried, the more she felt like she was being treated as the difficult one, the troublemaker, the diva, the woman who wanted more than she deserved. And once that narrative takes root behind the scenes, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Producers treat you differently. Editors treat you differently. The network treats you differently. Eventually, the audience starts treating you differently too, because they're reacting to the version of you they're being shown. NeNe claims the shift became even more obvious after she spoke up about issues she felt were unfair. In her interview, she said something chilling, that from the moment she voiced concerns, everything about how production interacted with her changed overnight. Calls slowed down, emails took longer to arrive, opportunities dried up. She says she felt like someone had flipped a switch on her without warning. And then came the final blow, something she didn't want to talk about back then, but is speaking on now. She says she started hearing about conversations happening behind closed doors, conversations that sounded a lot like people trying to push her out permanently. Not because she wasn't a star, not because she didn't bring in ratings, but because she had become too outspoken, too aware, too willing to call out the things other people stayed silent about. In her words, once you're labeled a problem, the decisions get quiet and the damage gets loud. And by the end of this part of the story, fans are left wondering, was NeNe pushed out because she changed, or because Bravo didn't like the fact that she finally saw the game being played around her? The breaking point didn't come all at once. It wasn't a loud explosion or a dramatic scene with cameras rolling and contracts flying. It was quieter, slower, the kind of unraveling that only someone on the inside can feel. And NeNe says that's exactly how Bravo wanted it. Subtle enough to deny, but strategic enough to hurt. She explained that after she started raising concerns, she noticed something strange happening. Her communication with production shifted in small but deliberate ways. Before, she was always in the loop. Her phone rang early, producers reached out constantly. She was involved in every planning conversation, every emotional setup, every decision that shaped the season's storylines. But once she challenged the way she was being portrayed, the calls didn't come as often. Then they started coming late. Then they stopped coming altogether. Scenes she was supposed to be part of changed schedules at the last minute. Important filming days somehow happened without her. Meetings she used to attend were suddenly labeled not necessary for her. In her interview, she said it felt like production was slowly erasing her from her own show, one deleted email at a time. And then came the season where she noticed she was barely in the promotional materials. Other cast members were placed front and center while she was pushed to the side, sometimes literally cut off at the edge of group photos. Fans noticed it and started asking questions, but NeNe kept quiet, telling herself not to jump to conclusions. But the biggest sign something was deeply wrong came when she realized the storyline she had been promised was completely different from the storyline she was editing in real time. She said the version of events she lived through didn't match the one the audience saw. The tension she had with certain castmates was exaggerated while the harm done to her was downplayed or ignored entirely. She said she felt like she was playing a character written by people who wanted to make her look bad and justify pushing her out. The final trigger happened when she tried to renegotiate her contract. She explained that by then, she had spent over a decade helping build the show into a cultural phenomenon. She believed she deserved the same level of respect and pay as the leads of other franchises across the network. But when she brought these concerns forward, she says Bravo reacted not with negotiation, but retaliation. According to NeNe, suddenly her offers were smaller, her episode count was reduced, her flexibility vanished, and the energy in the room turned cold. She said she wasn't treated like a veteran or a cornerstone. She was treated like a person they hoped would either quit or accept being minimized. She described a meeting where she sat across from people she had worked with for years and realized they were no longer looking at her as NeNe, the star, the franchise builder, the woman fans tuned in for. They were looking at her as an inconvenience, a burden, someone they wanted to phase out.
And then she said something in the interview that made the entire room fall silent. She said, "They wanted me to be grateful even when they were taking things away from me." That sentence alone exposed how deep the imbalance had become. But what really shocked people was when she admitted she believed certain cast members were being elevated specifically to replace her. She didn't name names, she didn't need to. Fans instantly knew who she was talking about. She said she watched producers invest in their storylines, push their narratives, protect their images, and shape them into Bravo's next big personalities, all while turning her into the villain who never got the benefit of the doubt. And as this happened, NeNe said she started hearing the whispers, the comments, the suggestions being made behind closed doors. Little digs disguised as concern. Critiques that never reached her directly, but somehow always circled back to the right people in the worst way. Things like she was too difficult, too emotional, too outspoken, too unpredictable, too confident. And when those labels stick, they don't just follow you, they bury you. NeNe said she especially noticed how quickly other cast members were protected when they made mistakes, while she was left to fend for herself. Incidents that would have gotten someone else a gentle edit or a producer-led smoothing over ended up being used as ammunition against her. Suddenly, she was the one causing problems, even when she was reacting to situations she didn't create. She described one season where she showed up for filming only to realize she had been written into every conflict, but left out of every resolution. She said it felt like production wanted her to look isolated, volatile, and unbalanced, even though she knew the truth was much more complicated. But the darkest part came when she said she felt like Bravo was intentionally trying to make her look disposable. Like they wanted the audience to get used to
the show without her, slowly lowering her presence until the idea of her leaving didn't feel shocking anymore. That's what she meant when she said sabotage in the interview. Not a single massive move, but a series of deliberate, quiet choices that made her feel smaller, less important, and easier to replace. And that's when the fight really started. NeNe said the moment she realized she had been officially marked as a problem was the moment everything around her shifted from uncomfortable to unbearable. The tension that once felt like a misunderstanding now felt intentional, targeted, calculated. And according to her, the people she thought would stand up for her, the ones she had worked with, laughed with, traveled with, carried storylines with, suddenly fell silent. She described a day when she sat in her trailer before filming, reading messages from fans who had no idea what she was going through behind the scenes. They were asking why she looked so upset, why she seemed disconnected, why she wasn't her usual self. They thought she was being moody. They thought she was being petty. They thought she was being dramatic. But NeNe said she had never felt more alone in her career. Every time she tried to speak up, she felt like it made things worse. Every time she tried to explain her side, she was met with excuses or polite dismissals. And every time she tried to hold on to the show she helped create, it felt like someone behind the scenes was loosening her grip. The breaking point came during a season when NeNe said she knew producers were deliberately pushing her into confrontations. She said they were sending certain cast members into scenes with information designed to provoke her. They were encouraging comments that hit below the belt. They were nudging people toward conflict that didn't need to happen. And every time she reacted, as any human would, those reactions became the centerpiece of her storyline. She wasn't being shown as the funny, sharp, charismatic NeNe fans loved. She was being shown as the angry one, the outburst, the meltdown, the instigator. And she knew what that meant. Once the audience turns on you, Bravo doesn't need to fire you. The viewers would do it for them. She tried to have honest conversations with production about how she felt. She said she wasn't asking for special treatment, she was asking for fairness. She wanted to be shown in the same balanced light everyone else got. But instead of support, she said she got warnings. Not direct threats, but quiet reminders about contracts, obligations, expectations. Warnings disguised as conversations. And that's when she realized they weren't trying to help her. They were trying to contain her. NeNe explained that the tipping point came when she heard that an internal discussion had taken place without her knowledge, a discussion about her future on the show. People she had worked with for years had reportedly sat in a room and debated whether she was worth the trouble. Not whether she was talented, not whether she contributed, not whether she had earned her place, but whether she was convenient enough to keep. Hearing that broke something inside her. She said she left that season feeling like she had been emotionally suffocated, like her image was being dismantled on purpose, like her legacy was being rewritten to make her look disposable. And she made it clear she didn't leave because she wanted to. She left because Bravo made it impossible for her to stay. But what happened next shifted everything. NeNe decided she wasn't going to let her name be dragged quietly into the background. She wasn't going to disappear and let a decade of work go unrecognized. She wasn't going to be the villain in a story that she wasn't even allowed to tell her side of. So she took a step most reality stars are terrified to take. She fought back. In her interview, she openly discussed the legal actions she pursued. She said she didn't want to sue anyone. She wanted fairness. But when fairness was denied again and again, she felt she had no choice. She talked about feeling silenced, blacklisted, and pushed into a corner she never imagined she'd find herself in. And what she described matches what fans had suspected for years. The stalled projects, the sudden loss of opportunities, the way she seemed to vanish from the Bravo universe overnight. She said she was offered deals that were so disrespectful they felt like slap-in-the-face reminders that the network wanted her gone but wanted her to take the blame for leaving. She said she couldn't win. If she stayed silent, she'd be erased. If she fought back, she'd be labeled difficult. If she told her truth, she'd be ungrateful. And meanwhile, she watched as other cast members were treated more gently, more carefully, more respectfully. People who had contributed far less to the success of the franchise. But the darkest detail came when she revealed that she believed doors outside Bravo were being closed to her too. She said she would have meetings for new shows, new opportunities, new ventures, only for those conversations to suddenly go cold. Calls went unanswered, emails stopped, promises dissolved. And she claims she later learned that people connected to Bravo were privately telling others she wasn't professional enough to work with. That's when fans finally understood what she meant by sabotage. Not a single event, not a public firing, but a slow drip of strategic decisions that kept her stuck in one place while everyone else moved forward. The interview made one thing painfully clear. NeNe didn't walk away from Bravo. She was pushed. Quietly, subtly, and repeatedly. And the more she tried to fight for her career, the more it felt like someone behind the scenes was determined to make sure she didn't rise again. What finally pushed NeNe over the edge wasn't one moment. It wasn't one meeting or one edit or one argument. It was the realization that the very network she had helped turn into a cultural force was perfectly comfortable letting the public believe she was the problem, that she was difficult, that she was unpredictable, that she had somehow outgrown her value. And the hardest part of it all was knowing she'd given them some of the most iconic moments in reality TV history. Yet now they were moving as if she never mattered at all. In the interview, she said she kept trying to make sense of it. She kept giving Bravo grace. She kept telling herself she wasn't seeing things clearly, that maybe she was overthinking, that maybe the industry just works this way. But the moment that changed everything was the day she realized she wasn't just being ignored, she was being rewritten. She explained that there were scenes filmed that never aired, scenes that showed her being supportive, warm, funny, and human. Those clips disappeared. Meanwhile, scenes that made her look defensive, angry, or emotional were highlighted, amplified, and turned into entire story arcs. She said she felt like editors were building a version of her that justified the network's agenda, and every time fans reacted negatively, it only strengthened the cycle. And then she said something that broke a lot of viewers' hearts. She said she watched people she thought were friends distance themselves from her, not because she had wronged them, but because they were afraid of being associated with someone Bravo no longer favored. She said she could feel the energy shift in a room the moment she walked in. People were polite, but not warm, professional, but not loyal, familiar, but no longer supportive. NeNe said that's when she knew her time with Bravo was truly coming to an end, because support in that industry doesn't disappear by accident. It disappears when someone at the top signals that you are no longer someone worth protecting. The moment she made her decision came during a conversation she didn't name publicly. She said someone she trusted asked her a simple question: "Why are you fighting to stay somewhere that stopped loving you a long time ago?" She said she went home that night, sat in silence, and realized she had been trying to protect a network that didn't care whether she stayed, left, or broke apart in the process. She said she had never felt so betrayed in her life. So she did what she hadn't done in years. She stopped protecting Bravo. She stopped holding back. She stopped watering down her truth. She decided that if her career was going to take damage, she wasn't going to let it be from lies, assumptions, or narratives created behind closed doors. She wanted people to know exactly what she had lived through. And that's why this interview hit the way it did. It wasn't loud, it wasn't messy, it wasn't vengeful. It was honest in a way that made people question everything they thought they knew about how the franchise was run. It made fans look back at old seasons differently. It made them re-watch certain scenes with a new understanding. And it made people ask themselves why one of Bravo's most iconic stars would choose to burn a bridge she built unless she had reached a point where silence was hurting her more than speaking ever could. She said she didn't tell this story to get her job back. She didn't tell it to get sympathy. She didn't tell it to start a fight. She told it because she refused to let her legacy be erased by people who never cared about preserving it in the first place. And the craziest part? Once she told her story, fans immediately saw the pattern. They remembered the sudden shifts, the unexplained pauses in her storyline, the tension that never made sense, the edits that felt deliberately sharp, the promos she was barely in, the reunion she didn't attend, the way Bravo moved on like she had never existed. People started saying what NeNe had been feeling for years, that she wasn't just pushed out, she was strategically phased out. And once fans started talking, Everything she said landed harder because the audience had watched it happen in real time without fully realizing what they were seeing. NeNe ended her interview by saying she still loves the fans and she still loves the people who supported her when she was at her peak. But she also said she'll never allow herself to be erased again, not by a network, not by an edit, and not by anyone who thinks her silence is easier to manage than her truth. And after hearing everything she revealed, fans can't help but wonder, did Bravo underestimate the very woman who helped build its most successful franchise? Did they think she wouldn't tell the world what really happened? Because now that she has, the entire story looks very different. So now that NeNe has finally spoken her truth without holding anything back, I want to hear from you. Do you believe she was slowly pushed out of Bravo, or do you think the network simply moved on while she was fighting to stay in a space that no longer valued her? And after hearing everything she revealed, do you see her side differently now? Drop your thoughts in the comments because this conversation is far from over, and I'm reading every single one. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into the stories Bravo wouldn't dare tell themselves. Turn on your notifications too, because the tea behind these franchises is always hotter when the truth finally comes out.